So, good afternoon and welcome to today's program, Retirement Readiness. What I can do today to be better prepared in the future for retirement. I'm Nicholas Cunningham, the program manager for LVAIC. We have a great presentation for you. Joining me today is Derrick Angradi and Evan Cowen from Cornerstone Advisor of Asset Management, located right here in Pennsylvania. Derrick is Cornerstone's senior consultant, and Evan is a consultant and the director of participant services. And today they're going to speak on the topic of retirement readiness. Before we begin, as I said, we are happy to take questions throughout the presentation, so please put them in the chat. Please raise your hand. We'll keep an eye on things, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And please be aware that we are recording this session, and we will post the recording on our website afterwards. And now I'm going to turn everything over to Derrick and Evan, please and thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, and I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Evan Cowen, and we're really going to talk about what you can do today to be better prepared for retirement. So I'd encourage everyone to ask any questions they have throughout the presentation. We will leave some time for Q&A. It's not going to be a terribly long presentation, so feel free to ask questions throughout, but it's more of a short and sweet message. Hopefully this can help you out, and be better prepared to retire when that day comes. Everybody retires at some point, whether that's voluntary or involuntary. And, there are things that you can do today to be better prepared, whether that's, you have a little bit more money or you're just, planning ahead a little bit better. So really excited to be with you all today, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Before I do, I'll just tell you a little bit about Cornerstone and myself. This is actually my favorite slide in the presentation. No, just kidding. But, my name is Evan Cowen. I've been at Cornerstone for going on 9 years. We manage over 125 retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs. And for the past, I'd say 7-8 years, I've been the director of participant services, where we meet with folks to go over their retirement plans, to get them enrolled. And, we meet with close to 30 to 40,000 people a year just to talk on the topic of retirement. So hopefully we can provide a little bit of value to you, and I'll turn to Derrick. I'll give him a second or two to tell you a little bit about him. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ev. And I think maybe this slide's a little better than the last one. But just to introduce myself to everyone here today, again, my name's Derrick Angradi. I'm a senior retirement plan consultant with Cornerstone. I actually joined Cornerstone in the beginning of 2025, but I've been in the retirement plan industry for the last 15 years, doing education sessions like this for a majority of that time. So I look forward to, having this discussion. These are, always, one of the more rewarding things that we get to do as consultants working on retirement plans.
So, here's just a little bit about Cornerstone, and I not to give us a whole commercial, but one thing I do want to point out is we have maintained a 97% client retention rate. So, service is really important to us, and a lot of it is delivering education like we're doing today. So again, hopefully this is helpful. So as it relates to retirement and, saving for retirement, investing for retirement, and then ultimately when you go to retire, some of the decisions that you'll need to make. One thing that I think is very important, there's a few decisions you need to make when you're saving, investing for retirement, is how much to save, how are you investing the money. But I think one thing that folks really need to understand, and I'm sure you're already familiar with this, but I wanted to drive it home, is what type of a contribution you're making. And a lot of retirement plans that you may be a participant of, may offer Roth. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes going on the difference between pre-tax and Roth contributions, because I think it's really important to understand that and make sure you're fully aware of what type of a contribution you're making. So the traditional way of saving into a employer-sponsored retirement plan is where you make a pre-tax contribution. So money comes out of your paycheck. It's going into your 401k or 403b. You're saving the money, you're investing the money, and you're deferring the taxes on that money. So you're not paying taxes this year. The idea is that you're going to continue to save that money, invest that money, defer those taxes, and then when you know, later on down the road, when you're ready to retire and you want to start collecting income from your retirement plan, you know, when you take a distribution, your pre-tax money will be taxable, so you'll owe taxes at that time. However, the benefit is that because you're retired and no longer working, presumably you'll be taxed at a lower rate relative to if you were to pay the taxes this year. So, you know, that's pretty important to understand. There's another benefit to pre-tax is that you get to deduct what you save this year from your income. So I'll just use like round numbers. If you earn $50,000 and you save 10% into your retirement plan, you know, $5,000 coming out of your paycheck, it's going into your retirement account, and you haven't paid taxes on that 5,000. You're deferring it, and when you go to retire, you know, you're going to pull that money out and pay taxes. But the benefit is you get to reduce your taxable income this year by that 5,000. So at the end of the year, you don't get taxed as if you made 50, you get taxed as if you made 45. So again, you're saving the money, investing the money, deferring your taxes. Hopefully when you pull the money out during retirement, you're in a lower tax bracket and you're reducing your taxable income on this particular year. So that's the pre-tax way of saving for retirement. You know, most folks are saving pre-tax, but the other type of contribution that I'd encourage you to consider, whether that's inside of your employer sponsored retirement plan, or, you know, maybe you have an IRA that you own individually, is what's known as a Roth. So that'd be you can make a Roth contribution inside of your 401k or 403b, or you could have a Roth IRA. And Roth is different from pre-tax in that the money that you're saving into that particular account is going in after you've already paid taxes. So in that example, if $5,000 that you've saved throughout the course of the year from now until you retire, if that money invests from $5,000 to $10,000, the $5,000 gain that you made when you pull that money out of retirement, it's all completely, you can pull it out without owing taxes because you've already paid the IRS those taxes when you've made the initial contribution. So not only is the $5,000 that you put in, you can pull it out tax-free, but also the gain, which that's awfully attractive for folks who are early in their career. I'd argue probably even up to their mid-40s or even a little bit later. So Roth is definitely a great way to be able to generate income during retirement that you won't owe taxes on, and is something I'd encourage you all to consider. The one thing about the Roth is you don't get to reduce your taxable income this year like you could with the pre-tax, but in return you get tax-free withdrawals at retirement. So whether you're starting out for retirement, planning to retire relatively soon, this Roth and pre-tax phenomenon is pretty important to understand. Am I making a pre-tax contribution or a Roth? If you work for an employer that makes gives a match or profit sharing, most of that money always goes in as pre-tax. So to the extent that you could kind of balance that out and diversify your taxes come retirement, again, the Roth is something to consider. Making a Roth contribution is a decision that you need to make based on your personal circumstances. So it really boils down to your age, your income, current and expected tax bracket, and then how many years until you plan on retiring. So like I said before, you have to weigh the value of tax-free withdrawals at retirement against the value of reducing your taxable income this year with traditional pre-tax contributions. I'll just pause there for a second. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. So I'm having lunch at the same time. So would I be able to take money from another account and roll it over into a Roth account?
Yes, so if you have money in a pre-tax account and then you want to convert it to Roth, the only downside is that you end up having to pay all those taxes this year. So you can do what's called a Roth conversion, but you're converting all the money that you haven't paid taxes yet on that, ideally you'll pay during retirement in a lower tax bracket. If you convert your pre-tax money to Roth this year, that is, permitted, generally speaking. I'd have to deep dive into your account more specifically, so I don't want to say yes or no, absolutely, but because some, retirement plans have different provisions within them. But generally speaking, yeah, you can do a pre-tax, conversion into Roth. Derrick, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add there, but
Yeah, I think one other consideration is you would have to check with either your record keeper or your employer to make sure that the Roth conversion is an option. Because not all employers do offer that within their plan, although it's more and more common that we're seeing that added as an option. So that's what I would add. And then I also got one question if you want to add anything to this. So what guidance would you give to someone who doesn't know if their tax rate in retirement would be higher or lower than their current rate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, that I can appreciate that question because we don't know where tax rates will be in the future, right? I think, I've done a lot of these group meetings where, say there's 25 people in the room, and I tell everyone to raise their hand if they think they'll be higher or lower, and probably 20 of the 25 are inclined to believe that taxes may go up over time. If that's the case, if you're in the camp where you think they may go up over time, that makes the Roth all that much more attractive because you can pay the taxes now, ideally when the taxes, you're in a little bit of a lower, when taxes are lower, and then let that money grow, compound, invest that money. And then when you go to pull that money out at retirement, if taxes have gone up, you can pull that money out and you won't owe any taxes because you've already paid the IRS that tax. One thing I would say, I mean, one could argue that, taxes could potentially go down, but either way, I mean, there's, very few people have gotten to retirement and then said, man, I wish I didn't have to pay taxes. I mean, very few people regret, making a Roth contribution, pulling the money out tax-free during retirement. But you could argue either way. And if you think taxes are going to go down, that's all the more argument for pre-tax. I think the message Derrick and I want to deliver today is that one isn't, better than another. I would argue if you have 5, 10, 15 years for your money to grow and compound, that if, 5,000 can go to 20,000 or 5,000 goes to 10,000 just due to you investing that money, that, the gains that you'll pull out of the Roth is, that's definitely attractive. But, like I said, very few people have got to retirement and then complained about not having to pay taxes when they pull money from their Roth. Great question. Any other questions?
I don't see any in the chat. And I'll just add to that. I think that we hear diversification quite a bit when it comes to your investments, but also diversifying from a tax perspective. So your contributions, right? So think of it that way. And maybe you don't want to have everything be pre-tax, from your employer contribution, your own contribution. Having a little bit of Roth money in your retirement account gives you a little bit more flexibility as in retirement as to, okay, maybe I can pull from the Roth portion so that it doesn't affect the taxes this year in retirement. So just another way to think about diversifying your retirement account is adding another source of money in it.
Great questions. And I think this is a great slide. I wanted to include it in the presentation. It really just goes over 3 different types of individuals. They all start saving for retirement at age 25. I recognize, some folks on this call may be a little bit older, but, the message still applies. And, it's 3 folks, Sam, Ethan, and Sarah, and they all start saving for retirement at 3%, or, Ethan and Sarah save at 3%. And right off the jump, Sam starts saving at 10%. So, 40 years later, Sam, obviously, who's saving 10%, and both Ethan and Sarah are saving 3%, ends up with the most amount of money. But, one thing I wanted to show you is that, you don't need to just save 10% right off the rip. If you are, that's obviously great. But really to show you the power of increasing by 1% per year. So really, when all is said and done, Ethan started at 3%, but bumped up 1% every single year until he got to 10%. And when all, like I said, when retirement came, he was a lot closer to Sam, who had 1.5 million in this assumption, and he had 1.35. But Sarah, who started at 3% and stayed at 3%, had about a third as what Sam did. So really, the message here is that obviously everyone would like to save 10%. It's not always easy. But if you start at a level where you're comfortable, whether that's 3, 4, 5%, and you commit to bumping up 1 or 2% a year, that can be very, very powerful. And that's definitely a way to be better prepared for retirement when that day comes, is to save a number you're comfortable with, but try to every year challenge yourself to do 1 or 2% more, because over time, those increases, they're a little bit painless, right? You don't necessarily notice 1 or 2% of your paycheck. You may feel it, but 10% of your paycheck, that you'll feel that. But 1 or 2% increases every year goes a long way over time, and definitely increases the likelihood that you'll be better prepared for retirement. Actually, this next slide, I really like it. It kind of demonstrates that even more. So just shows the difference between 2%, whether you save 4 or 6 or 6 or 8. And granted, over 25 years, so it's not a short-term thing, but just a 2% difference can equate to about $100,000 difference in terms of what your overall balance is when retirement comes. So everyone, some folks may be 5 years away from retirement, others may be 15 or 20 on this call. But it's just to show you the impact of contribution increases is substantial. And to the extent that you can bump up 1, 2, 3% a year, you're really doing your future self a favor. So, Derrick, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I know Evan just went through really the impact of your contributions and the different ways that you can contribute. I'll talk a little bit today about the investment side of your retirement account and some things you need to consider. So one of the other pieces that you can control outside of how much you're actually contributing is your asset allocation. So what does your retirement plan portfolio look like? So first we'll look at target date funds. And the reason we start there is because they're the most popular default investment that's offered in an employer sponsored retirement plan. So I'm sure most of you have probably seen a target date fund, whether that's on your statements or on the record keeper's website. And what a target date fund is based on your the year that you would plan to retire. So if you look at your statement or the website, you may see, the Vanguard Retirement Fund 2040. And what that refers to, that year would be around the year that you would plan on retiring. So for someone that's retiring this year, they would most likely be in a 2025 retirement target date fund. And they built these in as the default investment because they age with you. So right now, someone who's in the 2025 fund is going to be much more conservative than someone who's just getting started in their career and maybe in a 2065 or 2070 target date fund that is available. So this is one of the benefits of, I think, the evolution of the retirement plan landscape is these investments that you don't have to go back into your retirement account and say, okay, I'm 15 years away from retirement. I'm 10 years away from retirement. What do I need to change? What do I need to do? This is a nice automated option when it comes to the investment side. So that if you look on the bottom of this screen, you'll see that the further you are away from retirement, the more equity or the more aggressive you can really be with your investments. And then the small blue, or the light blue line, the further away you are, the more fixed income, the more conservative investments that will be in your portfolio. So if you see, as you go across and get closer to retirement, the light blue portion of your portfolio will grow. So it will get more conservative as you get into retirement and then through retirement, depending on which target date funds are offered or available in your own retirement plan. Some will stop once you get to retirement that year, and that glide path will level out. And they refer to this as a glide path, as to that line that goes as to how much is in equity and how much is in fixed income or the conservative options in your target date funds. But you would want to pay attention to that as you get closer to retirement, to evaluate and say, okay, is this going to continue to become more conservative as I move through retirement? So it's a nice way to automate your investing side. And I would say, if unless you're working with an advisor, you have someone that that can help you and is actually going to go into your retirement account and help you look at the portfolio construction to make those decisions. Target date funds are a nice way for it to be automated, and you don't have to go in and make those changes every year or every 5 years like you would, I'd say, years ago, when retirement plans required when you signed up that you had to create the portfolio yourself.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, really, it's really a matter of making sure the level of risk that you're taking as a retirement investor is aligned with the year that you plan on retiring, right? So Derrick mentioned, there's a glide path. Once you really start to get within about 15 years of retirement, you go from being about 95%, say, aggressive or more, allocated towards stocks or equities. And every year, as you begin to get 1 year closer towards retirement, which is this dotted line, basically your overall risk starts to decrease a little bit, and you become a little bit more conservative, so that, as you're getting closer to the finish line, your account isn't as volatile. And, when you're, say, 65 or 70, you're not taking the same amount of risk as you were when you were 25 or 30, per se.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And I do want to, I would say, we've talked about, right, the things you can control, right? It's your contributions, how much you're putting in, your asset allocation, whether that be target date funds or you adjusting the investments on your own. That's what you can control. And now when we look at this screen, this slide, these are things that are really out of our control, but we know that they're going to happen. We just don't know when. Right. So if you think back, whether you're closer to retirement and you've kind of gone through everything on this slide, or you're even newer to the workforce, right? You've probably gone through, whether it was COVID or the Fed Reserve dropping, increasing rates in 22, or even earlier this year with the tariffs, I'd say, uncertainty, right, where we saw that volatility. And what you need to remember is, over time, right, these are retirement accounts that we're thinking for the long term, right? This isn't something that you're just using, next year, unless you're planning on retiring next year. But for majority of people in retirement plans, you are looking at this as 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 plus years before you're actually going to use the funds. So it's important to understand there are going to be these swings in the market that you just have to almost just you just have to stay the course, right? Whether it's in a target date fund or you have it set up differently, avoid taking that immediate action and feeling the emotion of seeing your account go down. There was numerous times this happened where I would sit down with someone who was about to retire, and it would usually be two people that maybe started around the same time, and one would have a balance, let's just say 3 times the amount of the other person. And what had happened was back in the 08, 09 financial crisis, I would sit with someone who took the action, right? They thought, everything was going down. They needed to do something. So they went in and moved everything out of a target date fund or an S&P 500 index fund into the most conservative investment offered in their retirement plan, which gave them a sense of like, oh, I'm not going to lose any more. The flip side is then I would sit down with someone who did not do that and just let it go. And then you can see the rebound and all of the gains that have occurred, over the last 15 plus years. And just the impact of having that, what ended up being like a difficult discussion to have with someone who thought they would have so much more in their retirement account. But it's a good reminder to say you're going to see these swings in the market every 3 or 4 years, that you need to ride it out. And as you get closer to retirement, it's important to understand the risks and make sure that whether it's in the target date fund or you have set up your own allocations, that you have reduced your risk to the point where you feel comfortable enough. And as you're further away from retirement, or you have time for that to rebound. So that's the benefit of these accounts, is you have such a long time horizon. It's really when you're getting closer to retirement that you want to make sure that your needs for these funds, if you're going to be using them in 1 to 2 years, you have to account for that with how much risk you're taking versus someone who is maybe even close to retirement, but they know they may not be using this for 5, 10, 15 years.
That's a lot to digest, so I'll just leave it. Any questions real quick? Okay, very good.
You could go to the next one after this, Evan.
Yep.
So I think it's almost the way to think of when the market's going down, right, is sometimes you become emotional and you're like, what do I need to do to slow it down myself? How can I do that? And it is one way of thinking would be to slow down my investments. I need to be more conservative. But really, it's the flip side that's true, in that you should take advantage of that time when the market is down. If you can afford to increase your contributions, keep your contributions where they're at, you're getting, stocks that have been priced at higher levels at a discount. So you're getting more for your money. So your $100 that's going in every 2 weeks or out of every paycheck, right? Whatever your contribution amount is worth more when the markets are going down. So it is healthy to see those markets go down, especially for retirement accounts that are for that long term, that are more focused on the long term. So just remember that when you see it going down, if there's a way or an opportunity for you to increase your contributions, that's actually a good thing. And it's healthy for the market to go through these cycles where you will see the ups and the downs. It's just maybe not looking every day at your account balance.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on that. I mean, like, just to build on that a little bit more, is like in 2022, the market, the S&P 500 was down about 25.5%. Rising interest rates, high inflation, the war in Ukraine. There was a lot going on during that year, and the market went down about 25%. The following 12 months, the market recovered about 21%. So what those target date funds do is they make sure the level of risk you're taking as an investor is aligned with when you plan on retiring, but it also helps remove the emotion from investing. And you'll see basically on this slide what we were trying to demonstrate is that oftentimes a lot of the best years in the market come directly, right after some lousy years. So, 3 out of 4 years, the market tends to do pretty well. And that's sort of what's happened now. I mean, since 22, the market was up, north of 20% in 23. It was up in last year in 2024, and it's up so far this year. So it's been a couple good years in a row. of returns for retirement investors. And, now's a really good time to just revisit your overall asset allocation and make sure you're invested appropriately for when you plan on retiring. So that is definitely something you can do today to ensure you're better prepared for retirement.
Yeah, that's a great point, Evan. And I guess before we move into this slide, are there any questions around on the investment side of your retirement plans that we can answer now?
I have a question about the previous slide, comparing those historical events and the percentage. Yeah. So am I reading this correctly in that if we look at the Black Monday in 1987, the S&P dropped 33.5%, and then in the next 12 months, it gained 21.4%. Does that mean that was from year to year a net loss of 12.3%?
Do you want to take that one, Derrick?
Yeah, so you are correct in that so when we look at those that performance, right, that may not have gotten all the way back, gotten all the returns back from that window, right? That in this case, that last quarter basically in 87. But I think what this highlights is sometimes there's a tendency to react and say, okay, I need to pull out. So if you pull out after you're down the 33% or so, right, then you're not getting it back. So I think what this is trying to highlight is to stay the course, because it's so hard to time the market to know, okay, this is when I need to get back in. Because really, a lot of the numbers that make up that downturn for any of these events could really be boiled down to just a handful of days that really caused that big of a drop. And the same is true for the upswing, right? Where we'll see a big swing back. And that's actually what happened in April of this year, right? Is we saw it drop significantly in a few days and then pick right back up. So while it maybe doesn't pick it all back up in a 12-month period always, it's just showing that
money invested to get the gains that are coming. Is that
correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think like even COVID is a really good example of that. We were, doing a lot of education around that time. Let's just say someone had $100,000 and it was in the S&P 500, and all of a sudden they have 77,000 or 76,000 because the market went down, say 34%. It's real easy at that time, or it's kind of human nature, if you will, to say, well, geez, I don't want to go down 37% or 40% or 45%. Why don't I just take my retirement account, kind of move it to cash or a money market for now, wait to see what happens in the market. And that's like like a human tendency to want to do that to protect your assets. But the next following 12 months, the market recovered, just shy of 75%. So, big part of retirement and especially investing is trying to remove the emotion, making sure that you're invested appropriately for when you plan on retire. And, I think this is just a good slide that demonstrates that, there's going to be pullbacks in the market. But typically when you stay invested over the long run, which, retirement is a marathon, the market tends to recover that, and staying invested and staying disciplined tends to be the winning strategy. Great question.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And there was a question just about the slides being available afterwards. So there will be the recording and slides will be available for everyone afterwards. So you'll be able to see that. And if you just go back one slide, there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Evan, just in regards to contributions, whether 401k, 403b, your retirement plan, for 2025, the limit was 23,500, where we should get the 2026 limits here shortly in the next few weeks. So that would be the maximum that you can do unless you're over the age of 50. So the IRS gives the ability to defer even more into your retirement plans if you're over 50, where you can do what's called a catch-up contribution for an extra $7,500. And beginning earlier this year, they implemented what's called the super catch-up. So if you're between the ages of 60 and 63, and you're really trying to get as much into your retirement accounts as possible, you're able to do, it's 150% of the catch-up amount, which for 2025 would equate to $11,250. So they do give you the option to almost, in a way, once you're, maybe you wish you started when you're in your, like, earlier in your career, this is a way almost to get as much in as possible when you're getting close to the end of your career. And I don't know who, or if there's anyone on the call that this may impact, but for next year, if you have been doing catch-up contributions in the past, if you are, the IRS threw out the number of, if you earn over $145,000 in 2025 with your employer, your catch-up contribution next year would have to be in the form of Roth after tax. So that was a rule change that goes into effect next year. So I just don't want anyone that maybe had been planning or taking advantage of catch-up in the form of pre-tax to be caught off guard next year with that change. And you can go to the next slide, Evan. So, and this is always one of my favorite slides, and I always think back to, right, everyone that I've talked to in all of these different age groups, right, as to everyone who's, I'd say, in the second half of their career will always say, I wish I saved more earlier. I wish I started to save more earlier. And majority of people that you talk to that are in their 20s will say that I've got plenty of time, right? They've got times on their side, they can make it up later. And that's why that catch-up contribution exists, right? So that they can make up some of it. But the most powerful thing, and I think some of the graphs that Evan went through, is time. Time is the most powerful tool when it comes to investing, right? And you can't get back time. You can try to equate more contributions, but a contribution made in your 20s is worth significantly more than a contribution made in your 40s or 50s or 60s. So there's always going to be excuses and kind of those reasons as to, well, I can't afford it right now because we're saving up for the house, or there's a baby on the way. But then it turns into, maybe expenses for your own parents that you're thinking about, or maybe your children are going into school and you have to worry about those expenses that come along with it. So there's just always going to be the reasons not to, and just looking for the ways to make that adjustment to say, okay, I can do an extra percentage here. I can do an extra 2% this year. It goes a long way over time. And just know that, you're always going to see, there's always going to be reasons as to why not to, but anyone who is about to retire, they're never sad that they saved more than they needed. And there was one question in regards to the catch-up contributions. So if you're over 50 and are looking to retire in the next year, can you still take advantage of catch-up contributions? Yep. So you are able to, as long as you're over the age of 50, you can do the catch-up contributions. There's no, if it's like the last year that you're going to work, you can still do those catch-up contributions, even if you only work for part of the year. You still have your normal contribution limits that you would go to that are based on the calendar year. So if you're going to retire in, say, July 1st, you can still try to hit the maximum amount allowed into the retirement plan just in one half of the year. And so this is like a public service announcement for every retirement plan education meeting that we have, is make sure that you have your beneficiaries updated on your retirement plans. because most people don't stay at one employer for their whole careers. You move from one to the other, and you may have forgot to either consolidate that retirement account into your current one or move it into an individual retirement account that you keep up with. But the beneficiary that you have listed is where the money is going to go. So you want to make sure that those are up to date. So that's some homework for everyone that's listening or watching this. Go out and make sure, okay, who do I have listed as my beneficiary on my retirement plan? And if you have old ones, if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, you have to check them all, because whatever, when that time does come, it's going to go based on your beneficiary election. If you have a will, that's not going to override what is on the retirement account. So always good practice to just make sure, hey, this is what I want, especially when there's big life event changes. You get married, you get divorced, children, someone passes away. You want to make sure that you update that so it goes the way that you would like to see it go.
And just to recap real quick, I mean, the things we can control today, like what can we do to be better prepared for retirement, is make sure you understand, am I making a Roth or a pre-tax contribution? How much am I saving? 3, 5, 7%. Try to commit to 1 or 2% more each year. Make sure your asset allocation or your investments are aligned with when you plan on retiring, and make sure your beneficiaries are set. If you do those 4 things, that's a productive day. And to the extent that Derrick and I can answer any questions for you, we'd be happy to. And we'll kind of stop and pause there, and turn it over for any questions. And we really appreciate everybody's time. Any questions?
We got one question in the chat. How do beneficiaries work if you have 50% going to each child, but one child is married? If that child predeceases me, does that 50% revert to the second child or the spouse of the deceased child? You can see it in the chat if you want to reread it.
Yeah, I'm just reading through it.
Well, so it's my understanding that, if everyone gets to set their own beneficiary. So say I have, two children, the opportunity to update your beneficiaries. If you decided you wanted to go to the surviving spouse, that is certainly, from my understanding, possible. And if you decided to update your beneficiaries at the time, I think that is possible as well. Derrick, is that how you understand it?
Yeah, so I would say, I guess this is a good example of if there is a life event that would change where you would need to update the beneficiaries to go out and do that, or if you wanted it to go like 100% to just the one child, or however you wanted it split up, but to make that change yourself. Because if you took no action, it would be the 50% to the child that's still living, and then 50% really to like the estate of the child that had passed away. So I guess indirectly it would eventually get to the spouse, but there would be more work involved to actually get those funds.
Good question.
Any other
questions?
questions?
Well, we definitely have time, so we'll definitely allow if people still have questions. But in case people are jumping off, I just want to please just take a moment to thank Derrick and Evan for such a wonderful, informative presentation. I know I learned some things and will be putting some things into play in the coming years. So just thank you so much to Derrick, Evan, and Cornerstone for this presentation. I'm going to be including 2 links in the chat. One is for our other upcoming events. So we do have a Capital Blue Cross Health presentation on Monday about mental health in the workplace that I encourage everyone to go view and check out. And the second link is our newsletter. So you can have me emailing you directly for registration links for programs like retirement or health and wellness and things like that. So again, thank you, Derrick and Evan, for such a wonderful presentation, and we'll definitely stick around for any remaining questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Makes sense.
I'm going to stop the recording.